The laughter echoed off the marble walls like a rehearsed performance. Crystal glasses clinked, a live jazz trio played something slick and forgettable, and expensive perfume lingered in the air like invisible currency. Livia Harris stood beneath a chandelier shaped like a falling star, watching the room as if she were a ghost in her own life. Her dress was black silk minimal, masterfully cut, unforgiving. It slipped over her frame like liquid power. Her hair, pinned with surgical precision, framed eyes that saw everything. She wasn't here to be admired. She was here to listen. Across the room, Natan Harris, her husband of 7 years, laughed too loudly at something Greg Stanton had said. His smile was the same one he wore at board meetings and family dinners. Safe, tight, hollow. Livia tilted her head slightly, as if studying a painting she'd seen too many times. Stanton, in contrast, loomed. He exuded practiced charisma, tailored navy suit, graying temples, the smell of money and ego. He didn't glance at Livia. He stared a calculated, unapologetic survey of territory he believed was available for acquisition. Then came the moment. And who knew Natan had such excellent taste, Stanton said, eyes not leaving Livia as he sipped his scotch. You really outdid yourself. The room paused just a fraction of a second. Enough, Natan chuckled. Chuckled? He didn't protest, didn't glance at her, didn't even shift uncomfortably, just let the comment hang in the air like cigar smoke. Livia smiled, a small, perfect smile, polite, contained, and in that instant something inside her turned to glass. She excused herself with a hand on Natan's shoulder, cool fingers brushing the expensive fabric of his passivity, and walked out onto the balcony. The city stretched below, a grid of indifferent lights. Her phone was already in her hand before she knew it. Penthouse suite, she murmured into the line, her voice even. Something discreet, high floor. I'll pay double for privacy. She ended the call, exhaled slowly, and let the night wind lift her hair. This wasn't heartbreak. This was awakening. By the time Natan came to find her, she was already a ghost again. Composed, amused, back in character. He touched her arm lightly, as if she might break. You okay? Her eyes met his. Of course. I just needed some air. That night, while he slept beside her, snoring faintly into the silk pillows, Livia lay awake, eyes open in the dark. Not out of grief, not from betrayal, but from clarity. She no longer wanted to be protected. She wanted to be respected. And by the time this game ended, both of them, her coward of a husband and the arrogant predator who thought she was prey, would learn exactly how dangerous silence could be. Livia sat at her vanity the next morning, brushing her hair with deliberate slowness, every stroke a silent mantra, never again. Behind her, the room bathed in soft, forgiving light. Natan was in the shower, humming something tuneless, as if nothing had changed. Because for him, it hadn't. She watched his reflection emerge in the mirror, towel around his waist, talking about a meeting, something about market fluctuations, a lunch with Greg, as if Greg Stanton hadn't mentally undressed her in front of a crowd, as if Natan hadn't watched and said nothing. He noticed her silence, hesitated. You're quiet this morning. I have a lot on my mind, she said, not looking at him. It wasn't a lie. When he left, the door clicked with the same weightless sound it always made. Livia waited exactly 3 seconds, then opened her laptop. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, muscle memory reactivating a version of herself she'd tucked away years ago. Livia Harris, the crisis consultant. The one who used to fix the unspeakable. She hadn't pulled that card in years. Didn't need to. Not until now. Within the hour, she'd reached out to an old colleague under a different name. Within 2 hours, she had access to an encrypted platform. Within 3, she'd purchased a bracelet online. Sleek, gold-plated, custom-built with a concealed microphone. A gift to herself? That afternoon, she sat across from Stanton in his corner office, legs crossed, eyes unreadable. Didn't expect to see you today, he said, clearly pleased. Nathan mentioned you're more of a private type. People change, she replied, voice dipped in velvet. Besides, you left quite the impression last night. Stanton smiled like a man who believed he was winning. He leaned forward just slightly, a predator trying to appear casual. Well, I try, she tilted her head. Try harder. That single sentence shifted the energy. For a moment, he was off balance, just long enough. She rose, brushing invisible lint from her blazer. You have a meeting in 10 minutes. Don't you? He blinked, then glanced at his watch. Yes, how did you? I pay attention, she said, and walked out without waiting for a response. Later that night, Livia came home to silence. Natan wasn't back yet. She'd poured herself a glass of wine and pulled out her old leather-bound notebook. She hadn't used it since her agency days, but the pages still whispered strategy. On the first clean page, she wrote 2 names, Mitten, Greg. Under each, she began listing vulnerabilities. Not facts, but angles. Natan's need to be liked, his dependency on approval, his fear of confrontation, Greg's arrogance, his appetite, his addiction to control, and the cracks that could be widened. A plan began to form, not a brutal one, not fast, something elegant, surgical. And in its center always was her silence, the silence that had once made her invisible. Now it would make her unstoppable. Later, when Natan finally arrived, smelling like overpriced whiskey and stress, he tried to kiss her. She turned her cheek. He didn't notice. He didn't ask about her day. He never did. But this time she smiled to herself. Soon he would. The bracelet arrived in a matte black box, nestled in velvet. Livia slipped it onto her wrist with the same reverence a soldier gives to a weapon. Its gold gleam caught the morning sun. Discreet, beautiful, lethal. That day she wore it to brunch with Greg. He had invited her to a hotel rooftop cafe that overlooked the skyline, expensive and private. Just a little apology for my forwardness, he said, pouring her a glass of champagne without asking. I overstepped. She smiled over the rim of her glass, measured and slow. Yes, she replied, you did. Greg blinked, unused to women who didn't soften at his charm. But, she added, letting her foot brush his under the table, I'm not unfamiliar with games. That he understood. His eyes darkened with interest. I think we'll get along just fine. Every word was recorded. By the second glass, he was leaning in, touching her wrist, laughing louder. He talked too much when he was trying to impress someone. Bragged about his network, name-dropped politicians, casually mentioned a corporate favor he pulled that nearly cost the company millions. The audio would be more than enough to trigger suspicion. Livia simply nodded and let him talk. She didn't need him to trust her. She needed him to think he owned her. That night, Natan came home early. It was rare, and it meant he was nervous. He found her reading by the window, wearing one of his favorite silk robes. The sight of her seemed to disorient him. You look peaceful, he said, unsure. He hovered, awkward in his own house. Listen, about last night, about Greg. I should have said something. I just didn't want to make a scene. A scene? She echoed, still not looking at him. I mean, you know how he is. It was a joke. Natan paused, swallowed. He's important to my promotion. Livia closed the book. So am I. He stared at her, searching for warmth, or softness, or maybe forgiveness, but her expression was unreadable. Livia, are we okay? She turned her gaze to him. You tell me. Silence bloomed between them. He didn't answer. The next day, she asked Greg to meet her in private. Not his office, a suite. She made it his idea. Texted late at night, said she couldn't sleep, said she needed to feel safe. Men like him never resisted vulnerability cloaked in seduction. He booked the penthouse at the Legrand. She arrived in a champagne-colored dress, minimal jewelry, no perfume. The bracelet blended into her skin. When he opened the door, he was already smiling. You're even more dangerous than I thought, he said. I'm not dangerous, she replied, stepping inside. Just underestimated. Inside, the room was all dark velvet and glass. Moonlight spilled across the polished floor like spilled secrets. Greg poured whiskey. She let him undress her with his eyes, then turned away to inspect the view. Come here, he murmured. Not yet. She circled the suite slowly, asking questions. About his business, about his real business, about the shell companies, the golf course meetings, the money moved through Singapore. Now, she was like, oh, he answered too easily, drunk on power and foreplay. Every second, her bracelet listened. Later, she let him kiss her neck. She allowed his hands on her hips. But when he tried to pull her into bed, she placed 2 fingers against his chest and whispered, I said not yet. Greg laughed, confused but thrilled. You're full of surprises. He had no idea. Back home, Nathan stood in the kitchen, staring at his untouched dinner. He checked the time again. She hadn't messaged. Not even a lie. For the first time, he felt it. A shift in gravity, a crack in the illusion. His wife was not just distant, she was elsewhere. He tried to distract himself by going over presentation slides, but couldn't focus. He thought about her phone, her password. He thought about calling Greg and asking, what? If he'd seen her, that would be an admission. Instead, he waited and drank and waited. Livia returned just after midnight, calm and glowing, as if the night had been a spa retreat. He tried not to interrogate her. He failed. Were you with someone? She tilted her head. Is that a question or an accusation? I don't know where you were. She walked past him. Then perhaps you should have asked. In the darkness of their bedroom, Natan lay awake, trying to ignore the faint scent of cologne that wasn't his. It clung to her skin like perfume from a new life. Down the hall, Livia uploaded the first encrypted audio file to a private server, labeled it Stanton Phase 1.mp3. Then she poured herself another glass of wine and whispered into the darkness. Checkmate's coming. It began with a whisper, a blind tip to a mid-tier financial journalist known for breaking dirty stories that bigger outlets were too careful to touch. Livia sent the files anonymously. No flourish, no note, just the damning audio clips stitched into a time-stamped report with footnotes and dates. One file featured Greg bragging about moving money off books through dummy vendors. Another, more intimate, contained his low, husky whisper, "No one audits the chairman's favorite department." The leak landed like a match in a dry forest. By noon, her inbox lit up with alerts. The article had gone live, then reposted, then picked up by 2 major outlets. By 3, it was trending. By 5, the company's legal team had released a statement investigating alleged internal misappropriations. Livia watched it unfold from a quiet corner of a downtown cafe, spooning honey into her tea. She looked elegant, detached, like a woman browsing headlines from a faraway war. But this war was hers. Across the city, chaos brewed. Greg locked himself in his office, demanding full control of the PR response. His assistant resigned before noon. Share prices dipped by 3%. Internal emails leaked. A board member called for an emergency review. Compliance demanded access to his personal communications. By evening, Greg's face was pale with panic, his voice shrill in phone calls he thought were private. He tried calling her 5 times. She didn't answer. Natan, meanwhile, had just returned from an aimless drive around the outskirts of the city. He parked in the lot of an empty shopping center and stared at the sky for hours, pretending to think, but really just feeling the edges of his reality shift. When he returned home, Livia was waiting. He looked exhausted. "Did you see the news?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes. Greg's under investigation. The company's in free fall." She sipped her wine. "That's unfortunate." Natan blinked. "Unfortunate?" She looked at him finally, her gaze slicing through his panic like a scalpel. "You're worried about your job?" He hesitated. "Of course I am. If he goes down, the whole team might get replaced. My name is attached to projects." "Your name," she cut in, "is attached to silence." He flinched. "I was humiliated," she continued, her voice calm, almost gentle. "And you smiled. You smiled, Natan, as if it were nothing." He opened his mouth, closed it, then quietly, "I didn't know what to say." "That's always been your gift, hasn't it?" she said, rising, saying nothing, hoping others won't notice. She left him standing in the kitchen, next to the wine bottle he hadn't earned. Later that night, Greg sent her a single message. "Please, just talk to me. We need to fix this. I'm begging you." She replied with an address, the penthouse, one night only. He arrived before her, pacing, sweating, no jacket, no tie, the great Greg disheveled, desperate, undone. When Livia walked in, he practically lunged. "Tell me what you want. I'll give you anything." She regarded him coolly. "Anything? Yes, just make this go away." She approached slowly. He dropped to his knees, literally right there on the hardwood floor. "Please, Livia, I'm begging you." "I'll lose everything." She knelt with him, her face inches from his, then reached into her purse and pulled out the bracelet. Set it on the floor between them. "I already have everything I need." "What is this?" he asked, voice shaking. "A trophy?" she whispered. "A reminder?" And with that, she stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Behind her, Greg collapsed into himself. Across the room, a discreet camera blinked red, streaming live to a private chat reserved for executive staff. It was only 15 seconds of footage, enough to immortalize a CEO on his knees before a woman half the board thought was just some wife. The chat exploded. 2 hours later, Greg was placed on indefinite leave. The next morning, Natan received an email marked confidential-employment status review. No details, just a date, a time, an implication. He knocked on Livia's door. She was already packing. "Are you leaving me?" he asked, voice hollow. "No," she said, "I left you the moment you let him look at me like I was property." He stared. "You planned all this?" "Careful, Natan," she said, zipping her suitcase. "You sound like a man who just realized his wife was smarter than him." He stepped back. "I could lose everything." She touched his cheek, not tenderly, but with something like pity. "You never had anything, Natan. Not really. Just borrowed status and temporary silence." And then, without ceremony, she walked out the door. Livia's new apartment overlooked a different skyline, less arrogant, more honest. She'd chosen a corner unit with floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight pouring in like absolution. No husband, no shared toothbrush, just her coffee, and a view uncluttered by compromise. The suitcase sat in the hallway, still half-packed from the day she left. She didn't rush to unpack it. The suitcase had become a monument. A reminder of motion, of decisions followed through. An email pinged in her inbox. Subject, executive position, crisis strategy lead. From Lucian and Rourke Group. She read it twice, slowly. A formal offer. Full autonomy, 7-figure compensation. We've followed your past work discreetly, the letter said, and admire your capacity for precision under pressure. I had no idea. She accepted without hesitation. The next week was a quiet flurry of motion. She deleted old social media, transferred assets to her name only, and closed the shared savings account without notifying Natan. There wasn't much left in it anyway. The fallout had frozen most of his professional world. Gregory Stanton's public statement, issued through a rattled PR firm, insisted on retirement for health reasons, but the whispers were louder. And louder still were the boardroom jokes. Don't Stanton yourself. Natan, meanwhile, had been gently ushered out of the company. Not fired, not directly, but meetings stopped, emails went unanswered. One Friday, his keycard simply stopped working. He texted her once, "Did you do this to me?" She didn't reply. Let the silence carry the weight it always had. In her new office, sleek, minimalist, with a wall of books on power and negotiation, Livia placed a single object on her shelf. The bracelet. Not for sentiment, for memory. Control, once learned, should never be forgotten. One evening, as she was reviewing the structure of her new department, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She answered with a cool, neutral tone. Livia Harris? A deep male voice, polished, measured, a hint of command. Speaking. I was told you're the person to call when reputations need cleansing. Livia leaned back in her chair, swirling her glass of Cabernet. Depends on who gave you my name. They said you're surgical, cold, unapologetic. She smiled faintly. And I may have a mess, a very expensive one. She didn't respond right away. She let him fill the silence. I should warn you, the man added, his voice dropping. I don't play nice. And I don't lose. Livia chuckled, soft and dangerous. How refreshing. So, he said, a challenge hiding behind his words. She stood and walked to the window, the city glittering below like a chessboard. I don't want people twice, she said. Silence, then a low laugh from the other end. Perfect, let's begin. She ended the call, setting the phone down beside her untouched wine. No guilt, no hesitation, just precision. She wasn't seeking justice anymore, she was teaching. Out the window, traffic crawled like blood through arteries. The world moved, unaware it was being rewritten by someone who used to wait, to smile, to be spoken for. Not anymore. Behind her, the bracelet gleamed faintly under the desk lamp. It wasn't jewelry. It was a signature